You're listening to World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world. And here are your hosts, Aingeal, Rose, and Ahonu.
Okay, we've got a stream of consciousness happening where there's realizations happening very quickly. And it seems to be coming from a meeting that we had last week with a gentleman from Boise, Idaho, where he was talking about cancer. And what he said to us was that cancer, you'll have to forgive me now because I don't remember all the names of the doctors and so on who did this research, but he talked about some doctor back in, I think it was 1902 or 1905 or around about then, where he had found that the cell division that happens in the embryo was exactly the same as what happens with cancer. So when you have that single cell and then it divides into two cells and then you have 4 cells and 8 and 16 and 32 and all of that, that cell division continues unabated, exactly like a cancer does, consuming the resources and the nutrients of everything around it until day 56. And after day 56, it gets a different instruction. The embryo I'm talking about. The embryo gets a different instruction that says, okay, now this group of cells here, this cell group becomes a heart, and this cell group becomes a big toe, and this cell group becomes a brain, and so on. And it starts taking the instructions and is not an aggressive, all-consuming cell, the same as what happens if it didn't get that instruction. So the cancer then, by contrast, carries on consuming and growing and building on itself with no instruction. Now, why is this important? Because we've been trying to ascertain whether past lives affect us. And the stream of consciousness that I was getting was that this is very like the creation story as we understand it from the twin flame and soulmate perspective. And what that means is that we understand that originally there's unity, there's just this perfection, this, we call it God, source, whatever you want, but this unity. And that an aspect of that splits away, much like the cell division that we're familiar with in the embryo, into two. And we liken that to the first twin flame couple. And the way we find expression for that is to liken it to a clock face, where we have the 12-6 twin. This is the first emanation out of source, as it were. And then you get further cell division where you have lesser twins, like the 3-9 twin, or the 11-5 twin, or the 1-7 twin. So and these are lesser cell divisions. Now, when we come to the question of why was I born an Irish person, or why was this person born Chinese or South African or wherever, and that is because in this original cell division in spirit, as the twin flames start dividing down, we come to what are called soul groups. And the people who wrote the stories in the Bible about the 12 tribes of Israel, I think we're onto something in their understanding of that, because remember, just a few moments ago, I likened the cell division of spirit, as it were, to the clock face, which has 12, and I talked about 12-6. The 12 tribes of Israel were the ones that were incarnated on the earth and were split into 12 tribes, and they went in different directions. Some of them formed the Celtic races, some of them formed the Chinese races, others went to form the Germanic races, and others formed the South African, and so on. And these races are still active on the planet today. So when we talk about past lives affecting us, it's unlikely that I would have had a Chinese past life, because in the cell division that I spoke about, if I go back one level, I'm going to go back to my own soul group, which will have 12 divisions. So I'm going back into 1/12 of the soul division. Cell, soul division. It's interesting that they almost have the same sounding name too, cell and soul. Cell division, soul division. So I'm in I'm then in the Celtic soul group or Celtic cell group. It's unlikely that I would have had a past life in China or South Africa. Now, interestingly, Aingeal Rose did raise the question about, but I've had memories of being in ancient Egypt. Sure. And I think where that comes from is the more aware we become and the more conscious of the cell-soul divisions that I'm talking about, and let's call them the layers of the twin flame realities back to unity, back to source, we realize that at some point, those 12 tribes, those 12 soul groups, those 12 cells were 6. And at some point they were 3. And so, or 4. I'm not sure exactly how the numbers work, I'm sorry, but I have to think a little bit more about that. But at some point they were 1. So as our memories go back through the soul groups, the cell divisions, sure, we will have memories of having memories and incarnations at those higher levels of awareness. So we would have memories of being in Egypt in those ancient times, or we would have memories of Atlantis, or we would have memories of Mua, or we would have memories of the angelic realm. So that's how cancer relates to ascension. It's something that's out of control. It's something that has no instruction to say, and that's the instruction that we would say to ourselves, like, I am. It's not that you would say to yourself, I am not, or I am sick, or I have cancer. Because even in our own language, in the Irish language, we would say that cancer is upon me, or I have a cold, the cold is upon me. We don't say I am it, because we're not it. So therefore, that's an element of the instruction that's coming into the cell that says, this is what you do, not that. This is the cell division we want. This is the ascension we want. This is the awareness we want. This is the ladder of ascension back through the cell division, back through our ancestors. Now, that also brings another.
So what do you think cancer is from?
The lack of instruction. It's the confusion about what it wants. It's the confusion that comes from, like, depression that you said earlier, where depression is simply what's happening now and the difference between what you want to happen. And when they don't meet, there's depression. And that's what illness is, that what's going on is not what you want. And that's illness. And that is cancer, because what's going on is not what you want. So I want to bring in this other download that I'm just having now about the family tree, because I've done a lot of work, as you know, with ancestral healing. And what happens with the ancestral healing is somebody would come to me with a name, and I would tune into the vibration of the name and go back in time. Now, it's interesting that I would go back in time, because this is like going back, now I realize it, going back through the cell division, or going back through the soul division, the ancestral division of the mother, father, of that family tree, going back to the point in time where there was no distortion, where it was pure. And when that soul was pure, I find the vibration of that name, and I find an image that I then put down on paper. I downstep it, I bring it down, I put it on paper, and that becomes their new ancestral healing family crest. So what has happened? What have I done? It's like I've gone back through the physical body's construction, as it were, to the point where the cell division was happening, where it was pure. I've gone back to day 56 that says, okay, hold it there. We've got purity here. We've got no distortion here at this point. We don't want to continue with no instruction now. We're going to continue with the instruction that this is purity, this is divinity, this is perfection. And that's the image that I paint. And that's what gets imbibed back into the person who looks at their new family crest. This is exactly the same as the soul division that I've been talking about. It's exactly the same as the 12-6 cell soul division. It's what happens in the ladder of ascension. It's our journey back home to unity, to oneness, to single cellness.
Well, why couldn't this big human family all be the same soul group?
It is at a level up the levels.
Well, because I also remember being Oriental.
Yeah.
I remember having an Oriental life. Or why is it that the people who have their DNA checked and they think they have no relationship to anybody black find out they have black ancestry?
Yes.
So where's all that? So to me, you could be Native American. Or
you could be. Absolutely. But what you have to remember is that in the same way as I'm likening this to a family, I think what's happening here is that you've got a downward pyramid, first of all, from, let's say there's an original mother and father. And I'm talking about human manifestation now. I'm talking about
Adam and Eve
being born. So even let's use the Adam and Eve story. Okay, there's questions about it, but let's just use that because everybody, I think, is familiar with it. So if you have an Adam and Eve here at the top of the pyramid, they have children. So let's say they have 2 children, and they have 4 and 8 and 16, 32. And in that way, it multiplies out in exactly the same way as any cell division does. Okay, the numbers might be different. This family might have 3 children. This might have 6, whatever. The fact is, though, that it grows downward in a pyramid of expansion. Okay, so that down at the end, you've got all these children that can relate back to the single parents back here. Like us, in a sense, relating back to in the twin flame union, back to one. But then what's interesting is that if you take the individual who's down here at the bottom of the pyramid, and this is only an analogy now, when I say bottom, I don't mean less than or negative, but down here where there's millions of people, and if you take just one of those, one cell, or one individual, and like a me or you, so one person who's now looking at their ancestry and says, like you're looking at the DNA, and you're saying, where did I come from physically? Where did I come from? Okay, and the DNA does this analysis that says, oh, there's part of you that's French, and part of you is Italian, and there's a part of you from Chinese. Okay, what that's doing is it's saying, we've been able to go back through these layers, going up the pyramid, and finding that your origins are in darkest Africa, or your origins are Chinese. You're going back through the exact same thing as I was saying to you earlier on about the 12 tribes of Israel. Sure, there was mixing went on and going on and still going on. Sure. So you're going to have in other words, what I'm saying is that ultimately there is only one soul group. Ultimately, there is only one God. Ultimately, there is only unity. So all the parts that we're finding from the physical body in the DNA research is going to show disparate parts in the same way as the cell division is going to show 16 cells, 32 cells. They're separate cells, but if you go back through them and follow your way back through the ancestry, back through the hierarchy, as it were, back through the soul groups, you're going to come back through to belonging, first of all, to one soul group, one cell group, but then belonging to more of them, and then belonging to more of them as you go back towards the unity of it all. So
that it is possible then to remember a past life or to have lived a past life in any nationality, because there's been inbreeding that's been going on all the way. Okay, so
yes, you could be tapping in to the more aware that you become of yourself and your multi-dimensional realities, the more you become aware that yes, you have a memory of a different lifetime in a different soul group, but also
But it's
very
really the
likely
same soul group.
it's really the same soul group, but your consciousness is becoming aware of it backstepping or going up the hierarchy of creation, or becoming more aware of the unity of it all, as opposed to the separateness of it all.
Yeah, because I think those 12 tribes are all deluded now. I don't think they've all maintained their same integrity. I think they've all interbred throughout the centuries.
Yes, they would have, but they're still clearly visible in terms of, if you see a Chinese person today or an African person today, you're going to say they're different. Now, I'm not going racist here, don't get me wrong. Absolutely not, because I'm seeing the unity of it all. But at the level of the color of their skin, you can say, well, I'm European or I'm white. You can say that clearly. Whereas you wouldn't say that with somebody from Africa.
I know, but
or somebody from the Middle East, or an Indian.
I know, but what about one of my girlfriends, Debbie Letty, in Chicago, whose son clearly remembers being a black boy, and here he is white this time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That
he remembers being African.
I'm finding from when I was doing those paintings that I'm describing to you, that the more you're able to remember the previous layers going back, the more you're able. It's like when you talk about that particular child who says, a white child who remembers being black. That's like somebody doing, asking their grandmother, tell me about your life, grandma, where you came from. And they say, oh, well, my father was Latvian or Polish, or we came from Senegal or Kenya, right? And the more that person becomes aware, the more they see that, oh, that's a reality that I remember that now. I can identify with that because I'm downstepped from that DNA. So it's about the awareness. So obviously that person who says I've had a black lifetime is becoming aware of the memories coming from those higher levels of awareness as the cell division was happening. It's very interesting.
But you just said that a white person couldn't have had a Chinese life.
No, not.
And they can. Yes, they can.
Yes, but that's going back through the further layers. It's going back. It's becoming aware of the further layers of the cell division, of the ancestors back through time and back through the soul groups. But right now, there are clear soul groups. Like, for example, there's the 12 tribes soul groups. There's a Chinese soul group. There's an Indian soul group. There's a Middle Eastern Arabic soul group. There's an African soul group. There's a Germanic soul group. So they're clearly identifiable right now on the planet. And what I'm saying is that they're at like the first level of incarnation. They're at the first level of incarnation where the downstep happened from those soul groups. Going above that, they would have come together. So if there's 12 tribes there, there's 6 here. And in those, sure, there's mixing going on. Sure, there was separate, same way as the cell divides. Sure, there's going to be cell division happening. And that cell division is continuing. But what's coming to me, what I'm saying is that this is looking for the first time ever that there's a clear ascension path. It's a ladder to ascension by going back through our DNA to do it physically, or going back through our awareness to do it, the awareness of the different soul groups that we came from. And as you go back through them, you're effectively going back up this ladder of ascension to unity. Because at one point, it was only one. So what I'm doing now is I'm coming full circle that if we're manifesting an illness in our lives right now, that let's say we talked about cancer in the beginning. So let's say it's cancer. That cancer is a manifestation of something that's going on in our lives. Sure, that's clear. The cancer and any disease is happening because who we are and what we want is in conflict, or where we want to go or who we want to be is in conflict. So here we are, we're on Earth, and we're trying to be human, and we want to be human, and whatever else is going on with us, we want, need. And all that is in conflict with the awareness that says, there is only one, I am only one. So therefore disease happens. So this is why there's this constant struggle on Earth, because we're not at all aware of the unity of it all. We're not aware of the oneness of it all. We're constantly efforting, trying to be a human in a sense, in a false reality. The energy that it's taking to try and continue to create this reality is all consuming. And there's a part of us that says consuming, because that's what cancer does. It's like there's a cancer on the human condition that says you're trying to be something that you're not. You're trying to be human. You're trying to constantly make this reality real when it's not. And you know it's not. You know clearly it's not. Because you came from your parents, their parents, all the way along. You came from this soul group to this soul, so from this soul group, and all the way back until at one point there was just a single cell. Now even a cell brings the mind to insinuate that that's contained, and that's not what I intend when I say single. I mean unity, allness, everything, omnipotence. So we're trying to be what we're not. We can't be what we're not, and this is why we have this continuous struggle. It's why we eat other life forms to survive. It's why we breathe air in order to survive. Well, why can't we just survive on our own? Like, think about it. What's this constant need to drag in some air? What's the constant need to drag in another life form and consume it so that we can live or we can have an experience? It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So there you are. The origins of our being, the means to our happiness, the ladder of ascension, and the cure for cancer. Just finished at 22:22.
You have been listening to Aingeal Rose and Ahonu on World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world.